So with me, I'm having Marcel from Crayon. So do you want to do a introduction to yourself, Marcel?
Thank you, Alex. And yes, pleased to be back, third time and the last time, and obviously today a topic that interests everyone, which is money. So cost savings and cost avoidance, a very important topic in the area of SAM. My name is Marcel. I work for Crayon, a SAM services company, and I've been working for Crayon for about 8 years. I'm a SAM consultant, and I also lead our SAM tool team here in Finland.
Yep. And my name is Alex Goikin. I do international sales for Sensam since the last 7 years. We also want to encourage everyone participating today to ask any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll answer them all by the end of the webinar. So today, we'll cover how to track active usage of software and how that will going to help you with cost savings. How applying AI can increase cost savings. Marcel is going to go through top tier vendors versus the long tail spend. So we're talking about active usage because we have a huge trend right now in the SAM industry where we're moving away from installation-based license metrics to user-based license metrics. So the compliance is actually being a little bit simpler in some ways, in some areas more complex because you're being locked in with different tiers and license suites. But if you look at the compliance means paying for what you have installed. So there's no optimization in compliance, it's purely staying away from an audit fee. But when we're talking about cost savings and optimizations, what we want to achieve is paying for what you're actually using, and then active usage is where you're going to make the difference. In software, we have two different pieces. So one is where you have an application running in the background. This can affect you in many different ways. People who have been working with engineering applications are well aware of this one because there's license metrics that affect this. So we have, for example, concurrent usage, where you have different users who cannot access the applications because you're being locked out by other users. You can only use X amount of users for the same application at the same time. And you're being locked out just by opening the application. Also, if you're using token-based licensing, every time the application is running in the background, it consumes tokens for the next 24 hours, meaning if I start an application today, use it for today, have it in my background, starts up my computer tomorrow again with the application running in the background, it consumes tokens again. The most common one is, of course, around 365 and Adobe. Do you want to pay for the entire Creative Cloud suite for Adobe or individual applications? Here you really need to know what are people actually using and what are they just running in the background or not using at all. The same for 365 suite. How can we actually optimize it if we don't know what's being used? Applying AI to optimizing cost savings is the AI will only be as good as the data you have beneath it. So you're going to need all the data from what is the actual application that is installed, who is the user, how much are they actually using this application. These ones you're usually able to get from some of the tools. Cost is something that usually being added. Organization and license is something that we also need to manually interfere and act in on to get the underlying data. But if we can get all of this, we can train the AI to look for anomalies to find where we can do more cost savings. So now we're going actually to jump into a demo here to see how we can affect this. And I want to start by sharing the active usage so we get an understanding of the actual difference between just having the application running in the background and active usage. So here we can see all the computers where you have Excel installed, and this goes for all the applications. We can see when it was last used, how many times the users open and close the application. So total usage means how much this application is running in the background. And then we have active usage, meaning how much is actually being used. So if you only have this data, it can be tricky to get out the actual value. As you can see, this application has been running for 40 hours, almost 41 hours in the background, but it's only being actively used for 11 minutes. That means when the user is inside of the application and using it, that means that in average, he's only using it for 1 minute at a time. If we're paying now for an E3 or an E5 for this user, and we can see the similar behavior on the other applications in this license suites, we have a good chance of doing optimization. What we also want to look into from Sensa's perspective is we can look at this for a longer period of time. So here we have, for example, all of this data. So we can take away a little bit of the data. We don't need to have all of the information. So we just want to get an understanding of parts of this one and look at what is actually more important in this scenario. So now we have George here. We can remove organization as well, who's using Evernote. This doesn't require a license, but doesn't really matter. So we can see his usage behavior from November, December, January, February, and March. As we can see, he's opened it a few times. It's running in the background for quite a lot of hours, but he's not really actively using this. If we have this kind of same behavior across an application that requires a license or is very cost heavily, we can do some optimization, because now we have his 6 months of usage and we can see that he's not really using this one. If I want to see any other application, I can just search for it. So if I, for example, search for our own supervisor application, I'm going to get to see all the same data, for example, to see exactly how much he's using it and the average usage for any users out of this one. So what we have also achieved is in Sensam, you get this pre-built cost savings. And here we have already applied AI on these ones. So these SAM reports, here's where we include AI on this data that we have from Sensam. So we're looking at the behaviors of all users across all applications. So that means that for empty ClickUp, we have 8 users. The average usage might be 15 minutes or 50 minutes. Doesn't matter, because it's dynamic. So if we have 100 users, 1,000 users, doesn't matter. We're going to get an average usage time. And if we have people using it less than the average, we're going to highlight that from a cost savings perspective. So we only have 1 out of these 8, and then we can get an understanding of who is that person and what computer is it using this from, and from an application perspective. So we can now see that it's Niklas who's using the empty ClickUp less than everyone else. Then we can get an understanding of exactly how much he's actually using it and the average time he's using it to do optimization. And the last piece I want to share here is from a cost center perspective. So within Sensam, you get a full cost center view, and here you can play around with all the different license metrics together with all the active usage, and then filter out any kind of application or manufacturer. So now first you get an understanding of how much you spend on each different organization and vendor. You can see there's a huge amount of columns here. So if I want to have costs per active minutes per device, per core, installation, per user, whatever it might be, you can take out it. So we'll take in now the active minutes versus the different license metrics to get an understanding of the actual cost. The most used one will be, of course, cost per active minute per user or cost per active minute per installation. What I can now do is I can select any kind of vendor now. So I just want to filter out Adobe. What the system now is doing is removing all the different organizations where we have Adobe. So here we have total effective computers and total effective users. I also have total computers and users. So for this organization, for example, we have 394 computers and 15 users, and we have 2 effective computers. That means that's 2 computers where we have Adobe installed on, There's no one who has used Adobe though, so we can probably find a lot of usage. So there's nothing used at all on these ones. And then you can go deep dive if I just want to see specific applications. We just filter out on the specific applications. When I then go into my specific organization, I can then of course see the exact computer with all the users and usage. And then I can also see the different users and see what the cost is for the specific user against this specific application. So all of this one is already pre-built in the system. So simplifying how you can find cost, optimization cost, all is built in from a backend perspective. But that's just a short demo from Sensam. Now I'm going to leave it over to Marcel to take it on from the next side. So if we move into top tier versus tail end spend.
Thank you, Alex, and apologies to the listeners. There might have been a bit of lag on the demo compared to the voice, but hopefully you got a good understanding of what Alex was showing. The impressive stuff, especially that active usage, is something that really sets them apart from other SAM tools in the market. But now I have to change slides actually. One moment. Time to write. There we go. Now I'm going to be talking about how to treat top tier and tail spend vendors. So most customers have very complicated IT estates, usually at least hundreds, if not often thousands of different software vendors. And if you approach SAM in a way that where you treat all the vendors the same, you're going to be drowning in your own workload. So it's really, really important when it comes to making cost savings and avoiding cost that you really do prioritize your work and focus on the big fish before focusing on the smaller fish in the pond, so to speak. Here I have an example. This is a totally make-believe example of a vendor and a spend profile of a company. So as you can see, I've categorized software vendors into 3 different levels. I've got my strategic vendors, I've got my tactical vendors, and then I have my long tail vendors. And by strategic vendors, we usually mean enterprise-wide end user software like productivity tools, CRM, vendors that are heavily focused on server-side licensing, which is very expensive, such as operating system or database software. Basically, vendors which equate to a lot of the cost or software spend of the organization. Then tactical vendors are usually, I would call them like industry-specific software vendors. So for example, if you're a manufacturing organization, you might have a lot of CAD software such as Autodesk and software like that you use to kind of provide the services in the service industry that you are in. Another good example is if you're a game studio, most likely you'll have a lot of software development tools in use. So these tactical vendors are usually referred to as industry-specific software vendors. Then you have the long tail, which is usually vendors that the amount of vendors is usually in the thousands or at the minimum hundreds, but they really represent a really small part of the software spend of the organization overall. And often these are business function specific, could be test and development software, they could be project management software, sales and marketing tools, document management tools, HR software, software that isn't widely in use, but is really specific to a certain niche or that is used for a short term. And this helps me usually have discussions internally, but also with customers about where should we focus when it comes to looking for the quick wins and what can we do on a longer term basis to kind of clean up the customer's software portfolio. So maybe on another high level of what we mean by strategic vendors, so widely used, high value, often high risk vendors as well. Usually these vendors, they represent so much money that they're centrally managed and procured. There might be an RFP process or an RFI process in place, and there really is a controlled kind of mechanism into getting this software into the organization. Then long tail vendors, as I said before, niche, business-specific or short-term vendors, and usually these are not centrally managed, but maybe the business level will procure these independently with a kind of a low-level check-in process. And usually when it comes to procuring software or managing software, there's certain functions in an organization that work with different stakeholders. So that would be your SAM team, your procurement team, your risk management. So these are kind of vertical roles within an organization that might be or most likely will be involved in procuring software. But then when you think about strategic vendors, often you'll have roles like a vendor manager, who's dedicated to managing the most important vendors and the relationship with these vendors, tracking SLAs, etc., and also the people who are specialized in the vendor's licensing. Often customers have people with good vendor licensing knowledge in-house, but often they also use organizations like Crayon to then outsource that knowledge or get a third-party kind of sanity check of their own thinking. And with strategic vendors, the kind of steps or tasks that you need to take to ensure your cost savings and cost avoidance is often is maintaining compliance. So often these vendors still offer installed products where there's volume licensing and there's that clause of verifying compliance of the customer. So ensuring that you are paying for what you use is one of the key ways to get cost avoidance for strategic vendors. Then from an agreement perspective, you have usually an anniversary and a renewal, and you might have mergers and acquisitions, some other events that mean that you have a good opportunity to optimize your cost during the anniversaries or when it comes to negotiating a new contract. Obviously, when you negotiate a new contract, as we know, vendors like to change things. There's often new licensing terms, new contract models, etc., that need to be taken into account to make sure you get the most cost-efficient solution. And for example, like for Microsoft 365 that Alex was showing there, is kind of ongoing usage optimization. So tracking how often the users are using the tools, how they are using the tools, and making sure that they have only the users who are using it have the license, but also that they have the right level of license. Then for your long tail vendors, some organizations might have something called an enterprise architect, whose role is to kind of define the organization's software stack. Not all organizations have those kind of roles, but every organization has product owners. So these are usually specialists. They might sit in IT, they might sit in the business level, and they are like the power user of certain software that's used for a niche business-specific purpose. And when it comes to kind of thinking about cost savings and cost avoidance for the long tail vendors that there's thousands of, often it comes down to contract and tenant consolidation. So if the left hand doesn't speak to the right hand, you might have multiple instances of the same tool. So you might have, for example, 4 Adobe tenants in your organization, all being managed by a different product owner sitting in a different business department, all with a separate contract. So often consolidating these tools is one of the first steps to make one bigger contract where you can get better pricing. Then there's a contract and license lifecycle management. So product owners and these kind of roles, their focus isn't on managing licenses. They're usually a totally different role, and one of the many hats that they have is that they are a product owner for a specific tool. So they may not always be aware of when the contract renewal date or the license renewal date is upcoming, and having a centralized repository like ZenSam, where you can have that information of when a renewal date is coming and automate the notification to a product owner, is something that often means that a lot of cost is avoided. Because, for example, credit card software, everyone knows that they might have automatic renewal. So you have a 30-day notice period. If you don't remember to exit the agreement at that point in time, you'll have to pay for another year. So really kind of following and tracking the contract and license lifecycle is something that needs to be focused on if you want to make sure that you're not paying unnecessarily for software. Usage optimization as well. But then one thing that I'm going to focus on today is software rationalization. So when you have thousands of different vendors, how can you try and establish what you should be using for what purpose, and kind of make that software stack of the organization smaller and not have so-called vendor sprawl. Because I like cars, I've decided that this is a good analogy for how to manage different vendors. So strategic vendors, it's a real more in-depth due diligence process. You know, everyone who owns a car knows that you have to have a yearly checkup to get it stamped by the government to be roadworthy, and etc., etc. So they check the oil, they check the suspension, they check the lights, they check all kinds of things on the car, and you get a kind of certificate of being able to continue driving on the road. And it's a really in-depth due diligence process. And that's something that for strategic vendors who if you think about the 80-20 rule, the 20% of vendors will make up 80% of your spend. That's where you really want to focus the majority of your effort when it comes to doing in-depth work and in-depth due diligence, because that's also where you'll be finding the most license cost savings and the most cost avoidance by maintaining compliance. Then when it comes to long tail vendors, like I said, it's more about harmonization, about consolidation. It's about the different cars or vehicles that you have for the same purpose. So you might have a purple car, a red four-wheeler car, a green electric car, you might have a train, you might have all different kind of cars kind of for a similar purpose. And it's about understanding what is the best vehicle for the purpose that you need and which one should you continue with. And often, especially with SaaS, now there's more kind of independent procurement in the business level. IT no longer has like a centralized control so much over what is coming into the business and what is being used for what purpose. So then it's important to evaluate periodically, make decisions on standardization to make sure that then the kind of software portfolio doesn't spread too wide. Because if you think, okay, you're not going to be getting lots of license cost savings by removing software that has a few amount of applications, but where you will be making savings is kind of time and material and work and effort savings for procurement, IT, service desk, you know, all the support functions that have to purchase or support the end users or maintain the different software in the environment and evaluate its security and data protection kind of point of view. So the savings come more from a work effort perspective when it comes to long tail vendors, and more from a license perspective when it comes to strategic vendors. And I'm not going to be focusing on what we do with regard to strategic vendors, because it really does require specialists, and we would probably need 4 different webinars to go through Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, and SAP, for example, which are often strategic vendors, and it really is kind of its own world. But long tail, the approach to long tail vendor optimization is quite generic, and next I would like to demo a tool that we use with customers to do software consolidation. So, are we in full screen? I think we are. So this is a tool that we use in Crayon, and we build it on top of SAM tools such as Zensam, and we bring data from the tools into this dashboard. So this is a BI dashboard, and we have 5 different views. One is application category analysis, what is usage analysis, we have trend, version, and location analysis. And what we do with this tool, using the recognition library from Zensam, is that we have a look at the different software categories that the customer has in use and where we find the most optimization potential. So there's some general figures here that you can see. So 322 vendors, 236 vendors with less than 10 products installed. So really this is kind of like the long tail. So in this customer, there's about 90 strategic or tactical vendors and 236 long tail vendors. And then using the recognition library in Zensam, we've built a dashboard where you can see how many vendors and how many unique applications you have per category. So for the purposes of this demo, for example, if I select development software, I'll get an updated BI dashboard showing me, okay, I have 17 vendors for development environment software and 30 different applications. So maybe based on the fact that there's 30 different applications, and this was one of the categories with the most applications, I would most likely find software rationalization, portfolio consolidation potential under this kind of software category. And once I select the software category, I get a list of all the applications that I'm using for this purpose and how many installations I have of each software from each software vendor perspective. So I can straight away see, okay, these are the ones that are most standardized in my environment. But maybe from an optimization perspective, I'm actually interested in the other end. So I'm interested in the software that's only been installed maybe once, twice, 3 times in the environment. And maybe there's probably duplication within this software that's only been installed once or twice. And maybe I'll be able to remove some of them. Maybe some of them have been only installed for a short-term project and they've been forgotten to be removed. Another example, if you look at this list, analytic and scientific software, you can see that there's the most vendors, around 35, and the most software applications at 56. So I could click that and I could straight away look at the top end of the list. We have different vendors providing software for analytics and scientific purposes. And I can see, okay, these are my most commonly used softwares. But what I'm really interested in, again, is the end of the scale. So what are all these applications where I'm only finding one installation? Could I harmonize? Could I consolidate? Could I remove some of these and rather use some of the software that's more commonly used in my environment? And again, it's not going to provide you with extensive software licensing savings, but what it will provide you with is savings on time and material, procurement, IT, SAM, the people who have to manage like service desk, end user support tickets from this perspective. So this is one of the views that we use with our customers based on SAM tool data to help them optimize the long tail. Another one is one that was heavily featured in Alex's presentation. So when was an application last used? Can I remove unused software? And again, this is data brought from a SAM tool like ZenSAM to then be able to dig in deeper. So this data was taken in March. I can see that in December there was about 1,500 pieces of software that weren't used, and then I can make certain decisions to kind of reduce the scope. So I can remove Microsoft, for example, because I know I have an integration for Microsoft. I don't need that software to be on the list. I know that security software, it's not going to be removed even if it's not used. Same applies to driver and utility and device driver software. So then by making these selections in this dashboard, I've now reduced the list to 341. And straight away I have a kind of validated list where kind of like the usual suspects that I know that I wouldn't remove anyway have been removed. And I have a short working list of software that can potentially be removed from the environment. Finally, kind of related to the software categorization. So if a customer is a global customer, then you might have different software in use in different companies, and kind of building it in a location-based view, such as you can, or a cost center-based view, like you can in ZenSAM, or build that data in ZenSAM, will now allow you to then make an analysis of the usage in your organization, also from a geographic perspective. So I could select accounting software, okay, and then I see there's different accounting software around the world. I get a list of what is being used in each country, and that'll kind of help my consolidation efforts. Another good example, which is often if you're a global company, you might have lots of customer relationship management software, and here we go again. nearly a different software for this purpose in each country, and then you can kind of start having those discussions about, hey, should we consolidate? We've got too many data silos because every company, every organization globally is using different CRMs. Should we just select one and use that as our as our CRM tool? So these are kind of tools that Crayon can provide and provides its customers, and also delivers services related to long tail management and optimization to customers. And it does require a SAM tool to be able to build these kind of views, dynamic views of a customer environment. But we find that it really helps kind of analyzing and getting those eureka moments when you're able to play around with the data like you are in this kind of Power BI dashboard. That'll be that for the demo. Just a quick run through of how we approach long tail management and usage and using usage metering data. Think next we have the take home messages of today's webinar. Alex, do you wanna take the first two?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, when we're talking about cost savings and optimization, we want to bring to you all, pay for what you're using, and also when you're going into negotiation with the vendor, you usually have more leverage than you think, but you need to provide data and really show to the vendor that we're not really using this, we don't want to pay for it. Second, utilize AI for the data, bring the data, and then use AI for optimization. It's going to help you, it's going to speed up the process. It might even find cost savings you weren't aware of. And then do you want to take the third, Marcel?
Yeah. Well, I think the third is quite clear. So focus where the money is to make cost savings and cost avoidance. The vendors that have the most value and the most risk is where you should be concentrating your time. But also then from a kind of software portfolio consolidation and making cost savings or time and material savings from that perspective, it's important to take a process approach rather than a project approach. So kind of a big bang of software portfolio optimization or consolidation often doesn't result in what you wanted to, because it also requires time and effort from you, the customer, as well as us, the service provider. So kind of tackling one category per quarter or something like this, taking like a methodical approach using those tools that I showed you, that's usually the way that you really get the best results, rather than trying to kind of boil the ocean when it comes to the long tail and then hundreds and thousands of vendors. So I would say for the strategic vendors, go deep, and then for the long tail, it's all about having a process in place to consolidate when the opportunity comes.
Yeah, I really like the analogy you used with cars. So think of it as your daily driver. If your car is broken and you can't use it, and it's your daily driver, you usually have a big issue. But if you just have a spare car or an extra car, and you use it like once or a while, or an extra car, it's not that critical that it runs as effectively as your main driver. But also, if you have a Formula One car in your garage, the service probably be quite expensive. So make sure that you keep track of those also. Sometimes you have really, really expensive software and you just have a couple of those, but make sure that they're actually being used or utilized in your organization. So sometimes you just have a few really, really expensive softwares. So just make sure that you also keep an eye on that. That might be hidden in the long tail spend.
Exactly. Really good point, Alex. And context is everything. So, even as a service provider, if we take data like that, we often might not have the industry specific knowledge to know exactly what software costs or what the purpose is. So that's why we always work closely with our customers to get that context data that helps us prioritize. All right, we're at the Q&A section. Anything in the Q&A? I mean, thank you everyone for being really active. Hopefully we have some activity this time as well. It's always nice to answer questions if there are any, Elisa.
Yeah, the first one goes, where do you get the data for the nice dashboard?
From a SAM tool. From the SAM tool. So this yeah, this is data that exists, and we use the recognition library. So the brains of the SAM tool, we steal with pride. Yeah.
Okay, then can vendors move from strategic, tactic, and long tail?
Yeah, obviously SaaS is a good example. So someone in some part of the organization might purchase a software, use it, and then their colleagues start using it, and everyone's really excited because it's really good. ChatGPT, let's say, if that was a software with cost, it spread like wildfire through organizations. So obviously that means very quickly you can go from long tail and at least to tactical. Probably not strategic, because at some point, usually when you call IT and you say, I want to integrate with something, that's when they know that there's a new software in the environment. But yeah, obviously that categorization was based on spend. So it would move once the value is high enough. So yes, software can change categories.
Okay. And then next one, can IT or SAM teams delegate ownership down to the business for long tail applications?
I think it's quite common. Alex can jump in as well. I think it's quite common because a lot of the time business has the best understanding of what, especially if it's a niche software. But I think it's very important to support those product owners. Like I said, they are people with multiple hats. They are not focusing on cost efficiency and managing license life cycles and stuff like this. So you can kind of give some of the responsibility to the main user or the product owner, but you have to make sure that you have automation in place to help them, or a data source such as ZenSam in place where they can get the data that they need. So yeah, I would say it's a shared responsibility model most of the time.
Yeah, no, I think also that you should push down the ownership down the organization, but it's hard to push down if you don't know what's actually being out there, basically. So you need to have some kind of visibility or insight into what kind of application and where it's being used, and then usually you can find an owner of that application, and then you should push that down to him. Usually what's happened is that the business is starting to use an application, but they're not really aware of the actual end EULAs, end user licensing rights, or the actual spend of it, or what can happen if they integrate it. So it might start with a kind of a cheap SaaS application, but then they want to integrate that with another application or turn on SSO, and then the cost quadruples or something. So I think it's important to push down, but also provide visibility. But then you need the visibility from the start, basically. What is being used by whom? What's the cost, and what's the licensing effect of having that application in-house?
There's a lot of interest in the data that
Yeah.
used for the SAM tool for. So then the question is, how does the data come to the SAM tool? Is it manual work?
To the SAM tool or the dashboard?
Maybe
I think it was from the
dashboard.
I can take the one for the SAM tool, and then you can take it from the dashboard.
Yeah.
So the SAM tool data that we're looking into was all automated by the agent. So with ZenSam, we use our own agent, which means that the customer installs our application on all computers and servers, and that will give you majority of the data. Some data will always be manual, such as adding licenses, building up your organization structures, because that's almost impossible to automate. But such as things as user, application, hardware, cost, some license rights are automatically into the tool. But I would say it's a split between like 80-20, where 80% is automated and 20% is manual.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Perfect. And then from the dashboard perspective, well, it comes from the SAM tool. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can go into more specifics. It's not rocket science. For some tools, it's export the data, and in some SAM tools we have a direct integration. So it depends. Yeah. Are there still more questions regarding the data?
Wait a minute. There's also feedback. Someone saying, "Great webinar, guys."
Perfect.
Let me see.
I was going to say, I mean, we have 4 minutes left, and I have a few things. Lucky enough, I think it's next week, Friday, is our office warming party. So I'm available to be cornered and ask difficult questions then. I might use as an excuse now to not answer the difficult questions. But yes, so thank you very much for everyone who joined us through the 3 webinars. I hope you found them valuable and interesting. We still have the last hurrah, so next week, Friday. A big thank you from myself and Alex for everyone who attended, and we look forward to hearing and working with you in the near future.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.